Before the video starts, please like, subscribe, and comment. Any interaction will help me greatly. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers by January 2026. And also please watch until the very end, it's the least I ask for, thank you.
Celestia Ludenberg is one of Danganronpa's most memorable characters. The gothic aesthetic, the fake accent, the composed smile that never quite reaches her eyes. From the moment she's introduced, the game wants you to believe she's dangerous, and they achieve that perfectly. Celestia represents control in a game built on chaos. She lies effortlessly, reinvents herself completely, and treats the killing game less like a tragedy and more like a gamble she intends to win. On paper, she should have been one of Danganronpa's most compelling antagonists. So why does her story leave so many people unsatisfied? This video isn't about saying Celestia is a bad character, because she isn't. It's about how Danganronpa sets her up with incredible potential, and then squanders it through rushed writing, missed opportunities, and a downfall that feels less tragic and more frustrating. Celestia Ludenberg isn't poorly conceived. She's wasted potential. Celestia Ludenberg is introduced as a character built entirely on deception, not metaphorically, literally. Even her name isn't real. Born Taiko Yasuhiro, Celestia despised the ordinary life she came from so deeply that she erased it entirely, replacing it with an invented European lineage, a fabricated accent, and a meticulously constructed persona modeled after Victorian aristocracy. This wasn't just aesthetic escapism. It was survival through reinvention. To Celestia, lying wasn't a moral failure. It was a skill, a tool, a necessity. And that philosophy carried her far. Long before Hope's Peak, Celestia had already spent years in the underground gambling world, a world dominated by dangerous, illegal circles tied to the Yakuza. She consistently defeated seasoned gamblers, sometimes in games she'd never played before, simply through manipulation, misdirection, and psychological pressure. One opponent quit gambling entirely after facing her. Others barely had time to process their loss before she vanished with their money. This is important because it establishes something crucial. Celestia doesn't win because of luck. She wins because she controls people. That's what makes her ultimate gambler talent so compelling. Gambling at its core isn't about cards or dice. It's about reading opponents, exploiting patterns, and knowing when to bluff. Celestia excels not because she understands games, but because she understands people. So when she enters the killing school life, the expectation is obvious. Here is a character who thrives under pressure, a character who adapts instead of panicking, a character who lies so convincingly that even she begins to believe her own mask. On paper, Celestia should have been one of the most dangerous long-term players in the game. But here's the problem. The narrative almost never lets her act on that potential. For most of Danganronpa, Celestia exists in a strange limbo. She's framed as observant, intelligent, and composed. She references game theory during trials, keeps pace with Byakuya and Kyoko's reasoning, and positions herself as someone who understands the killing game as a system rather than a tragedy. Yet despite all of this, she rarely influences events in any meaningful way. She enforces the nighttime curfew, lectures others about adaptation, and speaks confidently about zero-sum games. But none of this actually shifts the course of the narrative. She doesn't manipulate trials from the shadows. She doesn't quietly engineer distrust. She doesn't gamble with information the way someone like her should. Instead, the story repeatedly tells us she's dangerous, without ever letting us see it. And that disconnect is the core of her wasted potential. Up until Chapter 3, Celestia's wasted potential can be written off as restraint. You could argue that she was waiting, observing, calculating. But Chapter 3 removes that excuse entirely, because this is the chapter where Celestia finally acts, and in doing so, exposes how little the narrative ever understood what made her dangerous in the first place. This is supposed to be her moment, and yet the plan she executes is the first time her talent actually matters. And it's also the moment it's undermined the hardest. Celestia's murder plot isn't subtle, it isn't psychological, it's needlessly elaborate, relying on costumes, multiple accomplices, fabricated assaults, and a web of lies that collapses the moment it's examined closely. Instead of watching a master manipulator guide events with precision, we watch a character overcomplicate a situation that should have played to her strengths. This is where the disconnect becomes impossible to ignore. A gambler doesn't win by stacking the deck so high it becomes suspicious. They win by making the loss feel inevitable. But Chapter 3 treats Celestia like a first-time liar, not someone who's spent years deceiving criminals who could have killed her for losing. The trial doesn't unravel her plan through clever counterplay. It unravels because the plot needs it to. Celestia's composure cracking in Chapter 3 isn't bad writing. It's one of the most honest moments she ever gets. For a character who built her entire identity on lies, perfection, and control, the idea that she can't maintain that mask when facing absolute defeat actually makes sense. It aligns with her self-loathing, her pride, and her refusal to accept being ordinary. Her accent faltering, her polite speech collapsing into vulgar denial, her desperation surfacing beneath the fake smile. That's not a betrayal of her character. That's the real Taiko Yasuhiro clawing through the persona. And that's interesting. But the issue isn't that Celestia breaks. The issue is that the game uses the breakdown as a shortcut instead of a payoff. For a breakdown to land, we need to see sustained control beforehand, successful manipulation earlier in the narrative, moments where her lies work, but Celestia is denied those moments. So when she finally snaps, it doesn't feel like a master gambler pushed past her limits. It feels like a character the game said was clever, suddenly proving she isn't. The emotional beat is good. The narrative scaffolding is not. Celestia Ludenberg didn't fail because she broke. She failed because the story never allowed her to succeed first. Her breakdown in Chapter 3 is one of the most revealing moments in Danganronpa, not because it proves she was a fraud, but because it exposes how much of herself she buried under the lie of Celestia Ludenberg. When her accent slips and her composure collapses, we're not watching bad writing unfold. We're watching Taiko Yasuhiro surface for the first and last time. And that moment works. What doesn't work is the absence of a foundation beneath it. A gambler who never convincingly wins doesn't lose tragically. They just lose. A mask cracking only matters if we've seen how tightly it was held. Celestia's persona was immaculate. Her philosophy was clear. And her talent was tailor-made for the killing game. Yet the narrative rarely let her exercise it in a way that shaped events. So when everything finally falls apart, the story treats her breakdown as proof that she was never as clever as she claimed to be, instead of as evidence that even the most carefully constructed lie can't survive absolute fear. That's the tragedy. Celestia's potential wasn't wasted because she was flawed. It was wasted because her flaws were never given the space to matter. Her ambition, pride, self-loathing, and adaptability all pointed toward a character who could have been one of Danganronpa's most compelling psychological players. Instead, those traits are compressed into a single chapter and resolved through failure rather than tension. Celestia Ludenberg wasn't a bad character. She was an unfinished one. And in a series built on despair, there's something uniquely fitting and uniquely frustrating about a character whose greatest lie was never convincing the others, but convincing the story itself that she had earned her downfall